The tale of Machine Head's career is certainly a multifaceted and interesting one. The band initially was born as a failed side project, failed in that it was rejected by Violence, which was Rob Flynn's former band. It then became Rob's primary project, and the group went through multiple different sides, such as groove metal, nu metal, back to groove metal, throwing in some thrash metal within the groove metal, the Blackening, if you really want to call that groove metal, or just call it good old-fashioned heavy metal. It's definitely been a crazy ride, and plus the Blackening, whenever it was released, you would have never thought you would have heard an album that massive from the band a couple of years before that, and it was certainly seen as one of their crowning achievements, being voted on as Album of the Decade by some publications. But here we are in 2016, and feelings toward the band have certainly shifted a little bit due to some comments that came out back in January, and were followed up within a Machine Head song a little bit later on. So there's a bit of a division war whenever it comes to the Machine Head fandom, and a lot of times the opinions have very seldom to do with the music, but some do. So let's take a look at 5 reasons why people hate Machine Head, and let's not just stick with the present, let's also talk about the past as well. So we begin with number 5, and number 5 is that their music is uninspired or unimaginative. And this is a group that it doesn't seem like that should really apply, considering they began kind of like a Pantera light, or at least a real complimentary band toward Pantera in the middle portion of the 1990s. Albums such as Burn My Eyes and The More Things Change certainly seem to bear some of these similar ideas. However, for most of those that are either big-time Pantera fans or just, like to examine music for what it's worth, feel that some of these licks and some of the things that Machine Head brought to the table, not only in that time period, but in the time period since, just really felt like it didn't have as much imagination or as much follow-through, that a lot was being held back, and even that there were some complementary ideas between Machine Head's music in the metal department and pop music, whether it came from the structure or what have you. This caused a lot of folks online to start to feel that the unimaginative nature of Machine Head's music made it really not for them, considering they saw way too many signatures that really were kind of associated with other things that they didn't exactly find too much favor in. And no, it's not just the black metal cult elitists and things of that variety. There are definitely some detailed articles out there on message boards that talk about the consistencies between Machine Head's music and pop music. And it's actually kind of scary that whenever you read them, they kind of make sense. Number 4, The Burning Red and Supercharger. After The More Things Changed, the band released 2 albums that were a little bit more inspired by the nu metal sound. Now, granted, they didn't go balls deep into this. They didn't jump into the lake of nu metal and decide to, start learning how to become an Olympic swimmer of nu metal. Instead, they just opted to sort of go in that direction a little bit, and it actually had a lot more harm associated with it than the music itself, considering the music itself wasn't overly terrible. However, Supercharger had another fate that was really befallen upon it, and that was the one single that they had for the album, which is Crashing Around You, and the album debuting 3 weeks after September 11th. The video for this song had a burning San Francisco skyline. You're kind of getting where we're going with this. Yeah, Machine Head's song was one of the most requested for that time period. However, it was outright banned from MTV and other outlets based around the events of 9/11 and sort of the sensitive nature, I suppose, of the topic that you would have seen on that music video. As a result of that, The Burning Red was one that had some great sales, but definitely got the sellout vibe from a lot of the audience. Meanwhile, Supercharger was doomed from the start, considering it got poor representation from the label. It actually nearly caused Roadrunner Records to suspend, and ultimately Roadrunner Records would drop the band, only to really quickly re-sign them after the release of their next album, Through the Ashes of Empires. However, The Burning Red and Supercharger was enough of a reason for some people to get off the Machine Head wagon very, very early. And this is definitely one that was more of a plight back whenever those albums were released, because if you talk about them here in 2016, they're almost like an afterthought. They're kind of this little curiosity, and in fact, some of the newer wave fans of this band may not even know that they exist, which makes me wonder about, whether or not they know Burn My Eyes exists. It's a hell of an album. I actually think I put that one above, The Blackening. But that's just me. Number 3, they're trend hoppers. Thanks to The Burning Red and Supercharger, thanks to actually The Blackening also, a lot of the fans that are now starting to hop off of the Machine Head wagon are starting to accuse them of being trend hoppers. That they were groove metal in the 1990s because that's what was really going on with Pantera. It was definitely one that was sort of a cash cow. It was at least keeping heavy metal alive. And then During the latter portion of that 1990s decade, they hopped into the nu metal wagon because that was what was becoming popular, that was lining wallets. And then all of a sudden, with Lamb of God and other bands like them, Killswitch Engage the metalcore genre, and In Flames, the Gothenburg sound, making, groove metal or heavy metal or non-nu metal all of a sudden viable again, they hop back onto the wagon and release a hell of an album. They're trend hoppers. They follow what's going on. And even if you consider, is there anybody out there, this is definitely one that feels a little bit distant from the 3 albums of the past, leaning a little bit more toward a simpler sound, which a lot of heavy metal bands that embrace a simpler sound are having a lot of success with. Are they trend hoppers? Aren't they trend hoppers? It doesn't really matter what your opinion is. The opinion of these folks, however, is that since they are trend hoppers, since they seem to only follow where the dollar signs really seem to be really, really big, this is a band that's not for them. They don't trend or really, hold the heavy metal flag or that heavy metal hammer high. Instead, they're just looking to chase a dollar and a dream. That last sentence was ridiculous. Number 2, the fan base since the Blackening. If you want a huge, major critique whenever it comes to within the fandom, those that still retain their fan base love for Machine Head, they even have this same, real dissenting opinion about some of the fans that have hopped on board since the Blackening. Now, one of the things that happen whenever you have a massive album, such as what the Blackening was, being considered one of the best, if not the best, of the decade of the 2000s, and still really becoming that of heavy metal legend. It's going to be ushered within the same whispers as Master of Puppets, Rain and Blood, etc. However, this has caused a lot of new fans to come on board, a lot of new fans that are hoping that they can do something that tops the Blackening whenever that's probably never going to happen, and constantly having either this universal beloved opinion for the group, which nothing wrong with that, either that or constantly critiquing them for never being able to do something better than the Blackening. And also, there's certainly some names and some words being thrown around to associate some of these new fans. Neckbeards, SJWs, posers. Oh dear, we're getting into these again. Oh, Lord have mercy. It definitely seems that there is a huge disconnect between some metal fans of the past and metalheads of the present. Either that, or there definitely has been some metalheads of the present that don't seem to understand some of the embraced ideals that really caused metalheads of the past to have such a negative opinion. You can see how confusing that this really is. However, Machine Head's longtime fans that have suffered through albums such as The Burning Red and Supercharger, in their words, definitely do not feel like some of these new fans understand what really Machine Head is all about, and instead have only hopped on board based around the success of the Blackening, and that their presence is based around just that it's trendy by itself to like Machine Head, that they are a trend band, that they are just a band of the moment as opposed to a long-term fan-base commitment. I know that those words sound ridiculous coming out of my mouth, but some of the things I read were ridiculous whenever my eyes caught, sight of the words. Either which way, it's definitely caused some folks just to walk away considering they can't communicate even with some of their own fellow fan base, at least in their own personal opinion. But that brings us to number 1, which is relatively obvious, and that's Rob Flynn. Now, Rob has always kind of gotten himself in trouble here and there with some of his words, with some of his lyricism. We spoke previously about how the one track off of Supercharger was basically plighted by poor timing and plighted by the tragedy of 9/11. Can't really blame that on Rob Flynn, can't blame that on the band. Really, the only people you can blame that on are the perpetual, the folks that perpetrated 9/11. However, in recent times, Rob Flynn has taken on a couple of different hats that have certainly gained him some negative acclaim whenever it comes to heavy metal fans. Whether they want to call them SJWs, whether they want to call him a neckbeard, whether they want to call him a poser, whether they want to call him this or that, it's really up to the eye or the ear of the beholder. But either way, his most recent activities here in 2016 have created a backlash that aims to potentially undo all of the positive elements that the band has been able to really repossess ever since Through the Ashes of Empires, but definitely got through the Blackening, Onto the Locust, etc. Based off of what happened with Phil Anselmo earlier this year at Dimefest, there are some lines in Is There Anybody Out There, the brand new Machine Head track, that directly called out Phil Anselmo. And it was something that, just a little bit earlier this summer, Rob Flynn openly admitted to that being the case. Ever since doing that, he has supposedly received thousands of death threats from Phil Anselmo fans, which really should say something about Phil Anselmo fans, but he's definitely riled up a crowd. And it's definitely something where them not being able to come together has kind of caused a little bit of chaos. But either way, this is 5 reasons people hate the band. And, well, they definitely hate Rob Flynn. And they might still think that the music is okay, but there are a lot that I've seen that said ever since that whole scenario took place, ever since him taking the opportunity to call out Phil Anselmo right there in the middle of the song like this is some sort of rap beat, they can no longer take the band seriously. They can no longer take Rob Flynn seriously, that he feels cowardly, like a little girl, like an SJW who's just trying to parade around his thoughts and beliefs, and probably eventually is going to make them want to, refer to him with some sort of different gender pronoun. Either which way, Rob Flynn, if he's aiming to really collect a fan base within the millions, may have just done something this year that may have felt right in his heart and his soul, but may have also damned a lot of those fans to search elsewhere for something new to listen to. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, 5 reasons why people hate the band Machine Head. Personally speaking, I like Machine Head. I've liked them since Burn My Eyes. They've been kind of an inconsistent band at times, but their material's okay. What's a band that you think is okay that has been roasted in this series thus far? Because, personally speaking, 95% of these groups I like. But what's a band that needs to be roasted and toasted, burnt to a crisp, and have their mother essentially mail to them a list of the reasons why their sons or daughters are really, really bad? Let me know in the comments below. My name is CoverKillerNation, and I'll talk to you guys next time.